Good morning, everybody. We'd like to welcome you to ITIL4's Modernized Guidance. Today, our instructor will be Danny Gowan. We're very excited for all of you guys to be here. I'm now going to turn the time over to her and have a great time.
Thanks, Emmeline. That was short and sweet. Hello, I'm Danny Gowan. As Emmeline said, it looks like we have a diverse group from around the country, which is great. Sometimes we get participants around the globe. So it's great to be here to talk about my favorite topic, ITIL. So let's, my background, I've been in IT for 30 years. I have worked from technical positions all the way up to senior leadership in IT, reporting directly to the CIO. I've also been a traveling contractual instructor for a good 12 plus years, and now work full-time at New Horizons Computer Learning Centers. I mostly deliver ITIL, but I also dabble in DevOps and deliver those classes, as well as some business analysis classes and Agile and Scrum. I don't really consider myself an instructor. I consider myself an evangelist. I'm out here trying to promote and get people excited and passionate about what I teach. And ITIL is a little bit like that. You have to kind of let it flow over you and rub off on you, and then consider contextually what you learned and how will you apply it in the real world. That's always the question that students and organizations struggle with. So my agenda today, I have about 20 slides, but I'm not here to teach you ITIL. I'm here to sort of show you what's included in it, and then talk a little bit about that application of it in the real world towards the end. And of course, if you have any questions, you could put them in the chat, or as we get more towards the interaction portion in about the last 15 minutes today, we can open your microphones even, and we could have live discussion if you'd like. So while I'm presenting, obviously keep your microphones muted. And again, thank you so much for coming and letting me speak about my favorite topic on the planet. So we'll first start up with IT service management maturity, followed by some of the documentation that's in the library, and then some of the content as well as why it's important to you today. And then we'll kind of wrap up with that same theme of what would you do even if you studied the ITIL deeper, what would you do with it, which I think is the bigger question. All right, so this is evidencing the fact that every business, every company has a maturity to it. Our industry today is called IT service management. And rightfully so, because we are actually service providers. What we've come to know over the decades, and I've been involved in a lot of this from the 80s all the way up to the present time, is that in our early years, we thought of ourselves as technologists, and rightfully so. Technologies were new, they were just entering into companies. Over time, we said, well, gee, we can't just focus on individual technologies. We have to think about a system and the whole thing and what it does and how we're going to use it. Then we got a little wiser over the decades, and we said, well, the way we work is important and the processes. And then we started realizing, along when version 3 of ITIL came out in 2007, that between in the early 2000s especially, everybody in our industry was realizing we have to think of ourselves as service providers, which put the focus very squarely on the consumer and the users of our services. And beyond that, digital transformation has basically brought us to the modern era, where we're managing portfolios of business services and offerings to their customers directly with them in an integrated way. Now, even though ITIL's existed for 40 years, basically back into the 1980s, it originally had a process-oriented approach that helped us evolve and mature if you were looking at it and applying it. In the next versions up, the version 2, it continued to hawk the importance of keeping customers happy. In version 3, the service lifecycle approach. And here we are today with ITIL4. So let's get on with it and see a little bit about what it has to offer. There's actually a library of content. It's documentation from day one. It was always documentation. Today it's written up in 6 volumes, and even though it looks busy on this slide, basically the names of the volumes, there's one across the bottom called ITIL Foundation, and then those vertical rectangles that are kind of standing up from left to right. There's 3 volumes that are ITIL Specialists with specific topics: create, deliver support, drive stakeholder value, high velocity IT. And then there's 2 volumes that are more strategically focused, because let's think about it. When you're in IT, there's a lot of different roles, and very critically important is the top down, the upper management commitment, what the purpose of the company is that you're serving. So the strategy approach, direct, plan, and improve, and another volume of documentation called ITIL Leader, Digital and IT Strategy. And then there's training and certifications around each of those 6 topics. Also in the documentation of the library, the ITIL4 content, there are 34, take a look at this list. I'll leave it on the screen for a little bit. Take a look at this laundry list of processes/practice areas that are a part of our world. Some of them are a lot more familiar than others, like maybe the ones in blue are ones that you're very familiar with. Those ones in blues we introduce lightly in the foundation training. We don't really teach you the processes in the courses anymore, because you know that you have processes today. And so rather than teach the processes to you, what they're trying to do with the ITIL4 is to get you to understand it's a movement, it's a transformation, you're evolving your organization. Now, how mature you are with each of these depends on what kind of a company you're associated with. You know, you might, why don't you put in the chat, what kind of industry are you supporting? Like, is it retail, insurance, government? Give us an idea of what type of industry your IT is associated with. Higher ed, you know, different kinds of organizations, right? So it's easy to see that we touch all of these or we use them, but how are we going to manage all this stuff, and who's going to do it? And that's the bigger question. So as we work through learning more and more about ITIL, so I see we have a lot of healthcare individuals and professional services, retail, government, more healthcare. Yes, and yeah, government. So it's a lot of complexity and a lot of things that we're managing to be a top-notch IT service provider organization. We also have education represented in the attendees. Very good. So that's a little bit about what's in the ITIL. And all total, these last 2 slides, these 6 books and these 34 practice papers amounts to about 2,200 pages of documentation about how to be successful in our industry. That's a lot of documentation. So the way they lay it out for us is that as service providers, our primary purpose is to serve our customers. And so on the left side of this, it's called the service value system. On the left side, no matter what role you have in IT, in one way or another, you're contributing to the strategic purpose of your customers, the opportunities that you could manifest for them through digital transformation, technology enablement. And for those things that are prioritized, you'll use all of your practices, all of basically the guidance of ITIL, and apply it and end up on the far side with increasing value for your consumers. Consumers could be people inside of your own organization in the departments, or they could be external to your actual company. So if you're a hospital, the patients and their families, but you still have departments inside of the hospital, and IT is usually doing both. So that makes it even more complex today. So what's the benefit of all this ITIL? What's the hype? Why does it matter? Who really cares? Well, things have changed in the world, and I think all of us realize that as just people in the public space. For example, everybody's carries one of these around like it's part of their body, and we're constantly using it, and we have information at our fingertips. It's a whole information and technology revolution, especially in the past few decades. So because the world expects businesses like your healthcare organization, your retail, whatever you're a part of, to work differently with them, we have to supply that kind of capability to our businesses. But we also have to work differently too. And that's where ITIL best practices really come in. We're looking at traditional IT ways of working or modern IT ways of working. The days of taking, for example, 18 months or even 10 months for rollout of a new product or service. Business can't survive that way. They're in a competitive space. Everything's fast, quicker. Everything now depends on technologies, not like 4 decades ago or 3 decades ago, where maybe certain things were running with our services. So we are the business, and that's the model that ITIL approaches its best practices from. The best practices are authored based on what IT had to do to be successful because of these external forces and changing global needs, and the fact that new technologies became available. We weren't usually dependent on the internet 3 or 4 decades ago. We had intranet networks, but now everything is exposed through internet or cloud. So that alone causes a big difference. So services that we provide have to be more than just technology focused. We have to have that service provider mindset and the consumer or customer focus in helping them to achieve the outcomes they need. So because of this changing world, changing environments within IT, and especially the business, to be competitive, to serve its customers better, need for speed, we have to learn how to be quicker. Okay, we can't do everything manually, and we need a lot of information to do what we do. We are in the era of big data. How do we manage and learn quickly and adapt and pivot? So we also need to flatten our organizations, be a little bit more cross-functional. If you're waiting for someone to provide you something, that wastes time. Digital transformation is the new business model, like I said, and also in today's guidance in ITIL, they do a very good job of reflecting the need to focus not only on customer satisfaction with offering the right service for the right reason, but also the experience of the customer in consuming and using your services and products. So new ways have emerged that can help us look at value streams instead of specific processes in isolation. And you probably have heard of, are using, or are familiar with things like Agile, Scrum. Maybe you've heard of Lean, originating from the Toyota production system, and today, being applied in all business and especially in IT as well, and even DevOps. So we've modernized, the authors have modernized the ITIL and refreshed it so that you could benefit from the greatest practices that have been gleaned from what's working in the real world for our industry today. So second slide on this concept, we'll just look at the bullet points that I have here. And so this is, ITIL has from day one offered industry proven best practices. Who writes the ITIL? Well, I've met some of these people. They're just regular people like ourselves who've been in the industry for a while, and they've had experiences where they've worked in organizations, either as consultants or on staff, where they have seen the benefits of working differently. And then guess what? Axelos, who's the official owner of the books and the literature, gets people together, and they author and paper it up. So it has a lot of credibility to it. So it's updated regularly. We went from version 1 to 2 to 3 to a little refresh to a 2016 practitioner to now the ITIL4. So we can, if you embrace it or already have, or maybe you got into the use of the ITIL and looking at it years ago, like I did, it'll help you to balance the need for change and agility for your business or for your own way of working, but also to keep things stable, also to create new revenue streams and sources of competitive advantage for your industry. You know, if you're an insurance company, for example, if your competitors come out with a mobile app where you take a picture at the car accident, it starts your claim and you can get it in within the matter of a couple of minutes. Guess what? You're going to do the same thing. So there's some people are innovating and they're the entry of something new and a digital way to do something. And then everybody else eventually does the same thing. So whether you're an innovator or you enter into the digital market space to be competitive, when the business makes that decision that they want that strategy, IT's got to be ready to fulfill it. And we have to work with them on that strategy right at that point of decision making. So that's what we mean by competitive advantage, supporting new digital business models. All right, so where am I going to take this? What else are we going to talk about? I am just going to highlight some of the content. I have several slides, and at the top, this is from those 6 books and from the courses and the certifications that you could achieve if you wish to study the ITIL deeper. So you'll learn things like how strategy and governance drives all else. IT shouldn't be making the decisions solely for what technologies to bring in and what products and services to offer. That comes from strategic integration with the business. We have to have a combined digital and IT strategy together. So focusing on value. Continual improvement. I don't know anybody who runs a business or any place in my career where I've ever worked where there was nothing about, can we do better? That's always the focus. Can we do better? And there's often ideas like a vision, and you have to figure out where you are, and you need techniques and approaches to do that. ITIL4 teaches a lot of techniques and approaches for how to take a deep dive into your continual improvement. Because we can't do everything at once, and we have to prioritize and decide what practice areas or process, what value stream is causing us the most pain. You have to learn about value streams. It's a more modern approach. We even apply agile thinking and systems thinking to our practices in IT service management today. Continual improvement is really how you run with ITIL. I can tell you a quick story. One of the places I worked in the past, and I was in senior IT leadership, was in K through 12 education back in New York State, where I'm originally from. When I first learned about ITIL, it was in the year 2001. I was at a conference, and it was very boring. The booth was like books and posters, and actually nobody was going to the booth, which I thought amazing with 4,000 people. I'm like, what is this? Why are they here? The sign said ITSM. I didn't even know what that meant. So I went over and talked to the gentleman, and the words that rang in my head that immediately grabbed me were processes, quality, globally recognized, best practices. And I was like, wow, I got to learn about this stuff, because we were basically pretty new with our network of 120 servers and went into service delivery business for our school districts in Dutchess County, New York. And I'm like, why should we start from scratch and reinvent the wheel? So the approach that we took was to just look at what's painful, what's not working well, who's complaining the loudest about what. And then as we tried to solve those problems, we would look at the best practice guidance and we would reflect on what's the direction we should go in and what are we going to change and how are we going to improve it. Well, that's what this is, continual improvement. It's the natural, organic way that a logical person would think about applying changes in how they work. We have to have a reason why we're going to do it. We have to understand what's working and not working where we currently are. We have to put a very specific amount of improvement in place and have a plan for that. And we should be able to see the benefits and measure it. Another component of the ITIL. So back here, we had this service value system, and at a high level, the 4 dimensions basically is what we work with to make the improvements. We're constantly massaging organizational relationships, levels of authority, roles and responsibilities, our culture, the people, information and technologies, working with outsourced parties, and also processes. They also highlight for us a list of 7 guiding principles. Now, most companies have a vision, a mission, a set of ethics, values. This is kind of in lieu of that. If you don't have any, or they're not aligned to things like this, here's a list for you. This will help you create the right culture, which has to be flatter, collaborative, more efficient and effective, cross-functional, instead of the days of like network people do network things and desktop people do desktop things and storage people do storage things, developers do developer things. We're all doing the same thing for the better common good of our customers together. And the ways that we're going to help ourselves have the right culture is to follow things like these guiding principles. That means the way we think, the way we behave towards each other, the way we have discussions, the way we do continual improvement, the way we run projects, the way we implement services. We have to think about focus on value, start where you are. Don't reinvent things if you don't need to. Try to use whatever's useful again. And if it's not useful, at least we looked at it. We could say, oop, nothing here, start from scratch. Progress iteratively with feedback. Don't try to do everything at once. Do small, targeted, gradual improvements. Collaborate and promote visibility. That's our main theme in the modern culture, whether you're doing agile, iterative, kind of project management, even if you're doing formal, traditional waterfall type project management, you'll work smarter and better with more of a cross-functional and share things visibly without people having to ask for them or send them to each other in email. Have ways that you can communicate through visibility of information and so on. We now have an approach that's more holistic instead of siloed. And we also don't want to get overly complex and make our lives more difficult than it needs to be. In IT service management, as a service provider of offering products and services to whoever your customers are, these guiding principles will serve you well. Keep it simple and practical, and also automate. Automation is the name of the game. ITIL talks a lot about automation, and the thing is, you have to figure out where to apply it and whether or not it's useful. We can't just smack in a tool and automate everything. We need human beings still. Even though we're automating, we really need the human beings to figure out our processes, the workflows, the optimization of them, making them lean, and then automating. And also automating, managing the automation. Once you automate something, you have to make sure it's working, and you also have to make sure that everything that it's dependent on is operational. So we're kind of shifting away from traditional operational to more of a digitally transformed capability ourselves to work smarter, just like we've empowered our companies to have all kinds of web-enabled digital transactions and services and fluid ways to share information across your organization and making things visible for them. Well, what about us? We need to do this for us too. So when you sort of embrace or live, I'll call it live these principles, and they become organically natural in your organization, you will develop a culture that is cutting away from the silos. You'll communicate better. You'll learn quickly from each other. Your teams will be more successful, and we can get away from the siloed traditional IT organization where it takes a lot of time to learn from each other or to figure problems out. Other things, value stream mapping or management is a theme. The ITIL courses themselves don't really teach you how to do a value stream mapping, but we get a lot of what ITIL is doing for us is opening our eyes to different techniques and approaches and the beauty of them. So if I silo my processes, I'm no better off than siloing my people. So for example, if you look at incident management, everybody can relate to incident management here, I'm sure. If you look at incident management and you keep measuring, oh, what can we do to make that process more efficient? And you spend a lot of time working on it. How much value do you really get from that? I don't know. It depends on where your pain and suffering is. However, if you look at a stream of work that provides valuable user support, and it's not just incident management, as you break it down, you're going to start to learn, well, gee, it's dependent on what we agreed to the business and service level management and how we prioritize an incident. And it depends on feedback from the consumers or the customers inside and outside your company. And we have to aggregate a lot of other information. It depends on knowledge bases, knowledge management. It depends on configuration information. So no one process is a silo unto itself. And instead of trying to mature individual processes, which was kind of a theme about 15 plus years ago, today we're learning a better method would be more of a fluid approach. Maybe even you could think of it as more of an agile approach. But let's look for the waste and cut it out, and let's automate where we can. And let's look at every process in a stream of work supporting each other correctly. It's not about individual processes. It's about the collection of interoperability of processes. So, if you're having questions as I'm going through this, write them up in the chat, and Emmeline's going to help me consolidate them later. You could make note of the slide number on the lower right if it was related to a particular slide, and I could put it back up on the screen when we do the Q&A. Now, this is very new to the ITIL. We've always talked about customer satisfaction and measuring and surveying and getting feedback. But today we're looking at it as a service provider. You have a journey going on with your customer, and your customer could be your own company, your business itself that you're providing services to, or it could literally be an outside company because you're an external service provider that does your services to more than one, like a managed service provider company. Either way, it's the same kind of theme. We have to explore what's needed, what's the opportunity to provide something for customers. We have to engage with customers to understand if the demand is there, answer their questions, see the value of moving towards a particular product or service, a new one, or getting rid of something that's legacy perhaps, and or modifying something that's already there. What is the need of the customer? What is the need of that product or service to morph or change? Then we offer what's required. There's a lot of work that goes into it, but this is just at a very high level. So we're seeking to offer the right things for the right reason to the right target markets, even if those markets are your internal business units. And we seek to agree on what that strategy is. And then eventually when we get everything in place and we work our magic that we know how to do, which is addressed in ITIL and other places, we have to onboard the service, and only after it goes live can we ascertain if value is present. Just creating a service and making it go live means I have a service available. But when the people who need it consume it, that's where we understand if they perceive that it is the right service, it is helping them, it is achieving those expectations and outcomes. So it's a whole quality loop here. We have to understand, as I deliver a service to you from IT, is the value evidenced by those who are using it? That's the point of co-creation. So this is covered mostly in the Drive Stakeholder Value book, but it's discussed briefly in other places. And we have to realize if something is off and then make improvements and things like that. So that's a discussion in the ITIL4. Other new things in the ITIL4, learn to manage it all in a rapidly changing environment. We have a section in the digital and IT strategy book and course where we talk about VUCA. They created a new word, V like Victor, VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Doesn't that sound like what plagues you every day in the real world? Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. What I love about ITIL, it's very logical, you know. So if there is a direction that an industry wants to go in, think of the business itself, like healthcare or hospitality or, retail or manufacturing, whatever type of industry it is. If they're the first to market with a brand new innovation, and technologies will need to support whatever they're doing, it might fail. It's risky to be the first person, right? So this helps us in digital and IT strategy to think about the strategy you want to have in your company. Is your IT strategy and digital and IT strategy in the company to be the innovator, to be the first out there, to put your neck on the line? Or do you wait until the way you're operating needs to move in that direction? What is your entry point to catch up with the competition? Eventually, if you wait too long, it's not a differentiator anymore for your company because everybody's doing it. It's now a commodity. So by investing late, you don't necessarily get the gain that you would if you were more of an early adopter, whether you're the innovator or not. So these are kind of discussions that we're having in ITIL today, which we didn't have these kind of strategic competitive advantage discussions in this kind of depth before. A couple of other things that you probably all realize is that you're invested in more than one kind of approach. Are you using waterfall for project management or for software development? Are you using Agile, Scrum for your software development lifecycle? What other disciplines have you embraced? So the ITIL4 has brought us to the point in time where we literally are in our industry. It's not about let's do this and not do that, or let's do that and not do this. It's like we need a little bit of all of them. And not only that, but if you're using Agile or Scrum, if you align to Agile thinking and principles and you're using Scrum as one of your approaches, maybe you're using DevOps to be more automated and have continuous integration and delivery. How does IT fit in terms of service management? It does. They even take the conversation there. Take a look at the top of this slide. All this stuff up here is your ITIL4 IT service management. And, we've been doing this work, planning, improving, designing, transitioning, delivering since 40 years ago. But now we have to incorporate that into a different model of speeding things up, being more fluid, being more continuous. Well, down here, if you are embracing DevOps, for example, and this is an exact diagram from one of the ITIL4 books, it comes from the High Velocity IT publication and certification. If you are, in fact, in this area where you're using DevOps and you're automating a lot of things for a product being changed and developed, agile, quicker, smaller changes, and more fluidly want to get them out to production quickly. Guess what? All of the processes have to be automated, like testing and release and deployment, and then operationally and different kinds of monitoring. If we're setting up an automated pipeline to regularly put changes out into production, that means that we've created a new technology-based operational world for ourselves to use, which now also has to be managed and maintained and assure that we're automating the right things for the right reason. And we can't do that pipeline in a siloed way. So there is true integration between service management, Agile and Scrum, and DevOps. So whether you think you're going there or not in the future, you could still benefit from ITIL4 in a modern way with digitally enabled business services and that kind of thinking. DevOps has kind of taken over the world, and the integration and change to IT is heavy. Often the culture doesn't get it. They don't understand it. So by studying best practices, you can get a better understanding of it if that's something, an area of need or concern. This is to show you exactly how integrated and complex digital transformation has brought us. And ITIL4 addresses this complexity. And the whole discussion is underpinned really by the whole concept of digital transformation. Look at the top. Only one of the circles is technology. Best practice guidance keeps you current and competitive. And everything that you change or do, or everything that the business wants to change or do, it's all interwoven. We must be collaborating. We must be communicating. The leadership approach has to change. We need transformational leaders in business and IT both. You need to figure out, if you're embracing digital transformation for competitive advantage, how to sustain that. You need to have more specification around the clear goals and strategies that you're trying to work with. Sometimes businesses trying to increase their target market, Sorry about that. Businesses trying to increase their target markets, grow revenue streams, offer different things, that could be a possibility. But if we don't talk about this and we don't align with how we're working, we could very well cause the demise of a company. So we have to integrate and work together on all these discussions, have a focus on value from the outside in with the customers, organizational changes, improvements, innovation. It's all interwoven. Sometimes people say digital transformation, and to an IT person, they immediately think cloud and everything as a service. Well, that may very well be true for this piece up here, the technology. But if you aren't having these discussions or having a clear strategy and integrating it with your business, no matter what technology you put out there, it may not be the right fit. So today's ITIL4 ensures that we are having the right conversations and we're looking at holistic thinking and all the other things that we talked about. As you try to apply and approach ITIL, these are just some ideas. I jotted them down. Where are you? Are you very traditional on the right, or are you more modern on the left? And these are mostly polar opposites. Like, are you a true collaborative culture, or do you just say you're collaborative and really you have a lot of silos? You're maybe moving towards collaborative. You might be somewhere in the middle. Or are you very traditional, command control? People don't jump unless they're told to jump. People don't reach out to the other until the last minute, that kind of thing. Let's take a look at another one. Do you really have digital transformation, or do you have big separation between the business leadership and IT leadership? Are you actually strategizing together and having clear dissemination and alignment of goals and objectives? Are you cloud? Are you using microservices, containers? So that's more towards the technology. Do you still have a lot of physical? Now, I'm not saying it's wrong. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's wrong to have traces of traditional IT. Only you know in your own organization where your business has transformed to. How much do they need a cloud-based model? Do they need that? There's a lot of different things that have come up, and all of these topics on the left side in the dark blue, these are topics that are addressed, in the ITIL. Value stream management as opposed to process silos, right? So I'll just leave that there for a second if you want to read through any of those. Here's a good one because of the pandemic. Remote business and customers, the anytime, anywhere, no more brick and mortar was the concept decades ago, but now it's very prevalent. If that's the case, then, working quicker and faster, being able to keep products up to spec, the cybersecurity is always present, of course, in the technology area. So how would you apply something that, let's say you studied ITIL, some of you may have already, you can let us know in the chat. Are you familiar with ITIL4 or are you brand new to it? Once you get to understand it, and you could read the literature on your own. There's 2,000 pages. Have a lot of fun with that. It might even put you to sleep. I've fallen asleep reading ITIL, and I love this stuff. But the point being that reading it isn't understanding it. So often when you get to classes and have discussions with real world people, and you get the spin on what it actually means, some examples and analogies, or you go to webinars that are teaching specific topics. That wasn't the focus of this. Focus of this wasn't so much to teach you specific topics. It was to show you the evolution to ITIL4 and how it's valuable to you today. So if you want to apply it, what you should do is the continual improvement kind of approach. You should basically think about some area that you're struggling with. Maybe it is people silos. Maybe it is nobody really pays attention to processes here. We have them, they kind of fall apart, and then we reinvent them, but we're not really managing our processes, and we don't really know where to go to make improvements. So that might be an area that you want to explore. Pick a topic, pick an area, pick a pain, pick a challenge, and get together with a stakeholder community. Literally, we mean that, a stakeholder community, not just technical people, but bring some business people in, bring, different types of IT people together and have a true brainstorming session. You could use different techniques, maybe some of the ones we talk about in the ITIL, but try to figure out, what your current state is, and have that vision in mind of what you want to change. So if you have a siloed culture and you want to go to more of a collaborative, then pinpoint those differences. What would the value be? Why should we invest in these improvements? Why would we go in this direction? Have a clear focus. You might end up with a big laundry list. People could hey, it's easy for people to talk about what's not working. So you may end up with a lot of stuff to think about. Prioritize it based on business value. What's the quick wins? What's the way we can go? And then start planning some specific initiatives and improvement. I'm going to go back here for a minute because this is extremely relevant right at this moment. Think about these guiding principles when you're doing that. Focus on value, start where you are, progress iteratively with feedback. So don't try to do everything at once. Think and work holistically, get the big picture, make lists, collaborate. You've got different stakeholders. You're using all of these guiding principles during that exercise, right? Once you know where you want to go, that transformation that you're after, applying ITIL4 is like a transformation. You're going to move from where you are gradually by prioritizing improvements, and little by little get yourselves there. Who's going to do this? Well, if you start with a stakeholder group, you could start aligning some action items and different kinds of people who might form committees to collaborate to move those certain improvements forward. If you stay focused on your key challenges in that discussion, and you know your ITIL4 guidance really well, it'll send you in the right direction on where your focus should be for those challenges. The goal would be to promote it and align it to your strategic vision, prove to the company that this is a direction that is valuable and how it's going to benefit them. And the bottom line here is to remember that ITIL is not an implementation. I used to have people say that all the time. We implemented ITIL and it didn't work, like 2 decades ago. And it's not an implementation. It's not like building a server or creating a cloud environment. It's a journey. This is what you do for a living. It's running the business of IT. So it's a journey. It's not an implementation. And what's going on with your transformational journey, if hopefully you could see that you're on one, and if you're not, you're stuck. So maybe a little bit of ITIL learning could be helpful. So my summary here, and then we'll take questions, is ITIL still relevant and important today? Obviously it is. Hopefully I've proven that to you. No one can afford to ignore the best practices for the industry that they work in. Just like a doctor's office is going to pay attention to medical records, best practices, and diagnosis and testing best practices, this is our best practices. So it is, yes, it's absolutely necessary. In today's modern IT, many principles, practices, and frameworks exist and have to work together in combination. That's kind of what we learned through this mini presentation. The goal is to understand the purpose and benefits of each and how they should integrate seamlessly. That's our job as an IT service provider, is to work well at what we do. ITIL is the guidance to help you know how to do that, so you could better serve your customers. Best practices are not an option. They're an absolute necessity for increased value to stakeholders and the ultimate achievement of the business digital strategies. So obviously we appreciate you coming today, and I am willing to take questions now. Emmeline, are there any questions?
Currently, we don't have any questions, but if you want to give them a second, maybe to type to see if we have anything in a couple minutes.
A lot of people are new to ITIL. I have a question for you then. If you don't have a question for me, did you learn anything new, and has your interest been piqued about ITIL? You know, if you're new to ITIL, you didn't know anything about it. Did this help you to understand it better? It's a lot of studying. It's a lot of learning. It's a lot of, it's the very fabric of how your organization is supposed to be running itself in IT. I always say to people this, if you're where I used to live in New York State, we were very close to the Culinary Institute of America. I would pass it every day. Oh, hey, we got an ITIL MP. Hoorah, you could have done the presentation, Oscar. So as I would pass the Culinary Institute every day, you know, you could take best practices like this and think about it in terms of any industry. Would you just learn how to be a chef, or would you learn about the entire hospitality restaurant industry? They have courses. It's not just the technical aspects. It's more important that they understand how the whole concept runs. Yeah. So let's see. I'm watching the chat here. Okay, great. Well, if you do take any of our courses, you might run into me. We have some great instructors besides myself, but hopefully I'm a good instructor, and I'd be happy to meet up with you. Remind me that I met you before in the webinar, if so. Nikki says, not sure if my current position has the influence necessary to implement change. That is an excellent point. That's almost like a question. I'm going to address that as a question. Where we are in our industry today, where we have evolved to from 40, 30, 20, 10, and now today, leadership has to embrace the ITIL4. So it's important that upper management says our strategy is to embrace best practices. Our strategy is, to ensure a direction that's aligned to best practices in general. It takes upper management commitment, Nikki, to actually be able to evolve with ITIL. You could do a little bit with it at the local level, but overall, to actually see the benefits at the strategic level, there's strategic with the business decision makers and IT, and then there's the tactical at the project management level and all the planning. A lot of it could be improved there. And then operationally, you could still benefit by understanding it. I always tell people, everybody in the organization needs to understand what ITIL is. And then it's up to the business to embrace it and move it forward. And so you are absolutely right. Your current position may not have the influence, but if you learn about it and your company moves in that direction, you'll understand what they're doing. Or you might be able to get other people to come to the webinar or listen to the webinar afterwards, and you might start a coalition of people in a right direction. Good luck with that, Nikki. I don't know about the e-certificate after the webinar. I don't think we provide those. Emmeline, do we do anything like that?
I am unsure of the answer to that question, but I will find out and I'll let you know.
All right. Thank you for the question, Hovan. Mark says, sorry for the late answers, but with local government, previously ITIL cert. Okay, difference between 3 and 4. That's a good question. Well, interestingly enough, if you know the history of ITIL, which I didn't cover because, I could only cover a certain amount in an hour, but it originated with government. The United Kingdom government wrote the first version of ITIL and kept writing it and updating it until they finally passed the baton to another organization. The difference between ITIL4 still has a lot of roots from ITIL3. The difference is those modern things. We didn't talk about digital transformation in ITIL3. We mostly talked about a comprehensive service lifecycle, strategy, design, transition, operations, and continual improvement. Now, all of those things are still activities and a part of how we operate today. But the added piece is we need the strategy, we need the direction, we need to be integrated with the business. And a lot of the different things that I noted here in this presentation, those are the new things that have come out since the version 3 was 2007. That's a long time ago. That's 15 years ago that it was originally written. A lot has changed in our industry. DevOps came along in the last decade, or 12 years, for example. Did that help, Mark? If you come over to the ITIL4, come over to this side, you'll start with the ITIL4 foundation. You'd have to. And I think that since you knew the ITIL3, you'll respect it and you'll get under the hood and see what it's got to offer. Yeah. Okay, so Emmeline answered your question. That's fast work. We do at New Horizons provide completion certificates and additional information that can be provided by your account executive. So that answers that question. You can get credit for attending this webinar, which a lot of people will need maybe for different professional certifications that they have. What other comments or questions might you have? I'm glad you liked it, Richard. Yeah, it's ITIL today isn't just about IT. It's really, if you can get your business departments to understand the value of you incorporating best practices, there's where you're going to get the funding and the backing to spend some time doing the assessments, thinking about continual improvement, ratcheting up the painful areas to help the company survive better. Yeah, appreciate your feedback. As far as I know, this webinar will be posted. It was recorded, and I wish you the best of luck in your IT careers and success with ITIL4.